Today on Earth Focus, food and social justice, human rights abuses, rape, and financial speculation in the food industry. The Swedish Society for Nature Conservation and UK's The Ecologist look at how the insatiable quest for profit destroys lives and livelihoods in Bangladesh, Mexico, and Italy. Coming up on Earth Focus.
Offered in restaurants and sold in stores, tropical prawns are a popular choice of food across the Western world today. But how did this luxury product become affordable, and at what cost? In a groundbreaking investigation, the Swedish Society for Nature Conservation travelled to Bangladesh to find out who is really paying the price for our newfound love of tropical prawns. The region of Khulna in southwestern Bangladesh is the country's leading producer of prawns for export overseas. It is at the centre of a bitter struggle, pitting thousands of impoverished people who are fighting to conserve their natural resources and livelihoods against the might of the prawn industry. A farmer by profession, Nurjahan Begum, like countless others, has lost her family's land to shrimp farming. Flooded with salt water by aggressive shrimp farmers, her family's once fertile cropland today lies under a prawn pond. She's not alone.
8 থেকে 10 বছর আস্তে আস্তে মানুষ খুব অভাবগ্রস্ত হয়ে যাচ্ছে এলাকায় ফসলাদি নেই গরু বাছুর হাঁস মুরগি গবাদি পশু সবকিছু ধ্বংসে বিলুপ্ত প্রায় এলাকা একেবারে মরুভূমিতে পরিণত হয়ে গেছে এলাকার সমস্ত রাস্তাঘাট অবকাঠামো সবকিছু ধ্বংসপ্রাপ্ত প্রায় জলাধারও আছে যেগুলো বহিরাগত মালিকদের মানে প্রশাসনিক কাঠামোকে হাতে নিয়ে এগুলো দখল করা তাদের পক্ষে অত্যন্ত সহজ
It is not just the communities where shrimp are cultivated that are threatened, however. The rivers in this region flow into the vast Sundarbans mangrove forest, providing sanctuary to endangered species of river dolphins and crocodile, whilst also providing a vital food resource to local communities. But most shrimp farms in Bangladesh stock their ponds with wild-caught shrimp larvae, and these are caught in the rivers using very fine nets. For every shrimp caught, an average of 50 juvenile fish will die, and this practice is decimating the marine environment. Embankments are used in this region of coastal Bangladesh to protect farmland and communities from storms that regularly hit this coastline. But shrimp farmers in Bangladesh illegally build drainage systems through the embankments, and the consequences of this have proven to be catastrophic during times of extreme weather. Cyclone Ayla struck Bangladesh several years ago.
প্রায় আনুমানিক দুপুরের দিকে হয় 2টার পরে এটা শুরু হয় এবং এটা এলাকার জনসাধারণের যে দুটো ইউনিয়ন ইফেক্ট হয় এবং জলোচ্ছ্বাস প্রকৃত অর্থে এই যে আইলা হয়েছে আইলার দিনেই যে সমস্ত রাস্তাগুলো ওয়াশ আউট হয়েছে বা ওভারফ্লো হয়েছে এই লবণ পানি যে 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 জায়গা দিয়ে উঠাইছে যেখানে স্লুইস গেট ছিল নদীর থেকে ওই ঘের করার জন্য পাইপ ছিল এগুলো প্রায় সব মানে 100% থেকে 99% ভেঙে ওখান থেকে পানি উঠছে এবং এটা ধ্বংস হওয়ার মূল কারণ হচ্ছে এখানে চিংড়ি চাষ করায় নদীর ভাঙন হচ্ছে মানে প্রাকৃতিক দুর্যোগে ইফেক্ট হচ্ছে তাতে আমাদের জমি জমা নষ্ট হচ্ছে
During the course of the investigation, our team also uncovered disturbing evidence to suggest that illegal chemicals are being regularly and routinely used in shrimp farms destined for European markets.
মূলত এটা ইন্ডিয়া থেকে নিয়ে আসার জন্য যে এটা দিলে ভালো কাজ হয় এবং 100তে 100 রেজাল্ট পাওয়া যায় আর কি এই জন্য মূলত, কিন্তু এটা অত্যন্ত ক্ষতিকারক, কারণ এটা আমি নিজে ব্যবহার করছি। মানে আপনাকে আমি কিভাবে বোঝাবো এর ক্ষতির ধরন, যে ইনলেট পাইপ দিয়ে পানি ঢুকতেছে আমাদের জমিতে, ঠিক সেই মুহূর্তে আমার ওষুধটা প্রয়োগ করা পড়ছিল। মানে স্রোত যে পর্যন্ত গিয়েছিল ওই পর্যন্ত কিছুই ছিল না, এমনকি সাপ মারা গেছিলো। এখানকার যারা তৎকালীন সময় মৎস্য চাষ করেন আমাকে ডেকে নিয়ে গেছিলো, তো তুমি কী ওষুধ ব্যবহার করছো?
The household name of the chemical he is referring to is Hildan, an endosulfan that is banned in Bangladesh and over 80 other countries around the world.
Endosulfan is a broad-spectrum insecticide. Endosulfan's been around for years. It's a very old chemical. It's aimed at killing insects and preventing them from becoming pests. The impact of endosulfan on the marine environment is disastrous. It's a persistent chemical. It's an incredibly toxic chemical. It's one that affects nearly every element of the aquatic ecosystem, from snails through to fish, through to amphibians. All the way up the food chain, it has an impact. Endosulfan is banned in a huge number of countries around the world, and it's banned for a reason. That's because it's dangerous, that it damages the environment. So my message to consumers who eat prawns from ponds where endosulfan might be in use is don't do it.
It is not just the unregulated use of illegal chemicals that consumers should be worried about. In 2010, a British film crew also uncovered evidence of routine adulteration of shrimp destined for factories that supply the EU. In this footage, the trader demonstrates how shrimp from this region in Bangladesh are secretly injected with dirty water to add weight and thus profit before they are sold onto the factories. Some NGOs and aid agencies have often claimed that the export-orientated shrimp industry in Bangladesh is necessary for development. Kushi Kabir is the coordinator of Nigeria Kori, a movement of over 200,000 landless and marginalised people affected by commercial shrimp aquaculture.
It is anti-development. People who are living in areas where shrimp is being cultivated are being completely devoid of their livelihoods, of their lives often, because there's so much violence. It's a system that's totally non-sustainable. And just to provide some food for people to be able to eat cheaply in the northern countries and the consumer countries, how can that be development?
Faced with the loss of their land and livelihood, our investigation found that those who oppose the shrimp industry are often met with intimidation, violence and false charges from corrupt local judiciaries who favour the shrimp farmers.
যে কারণে বিভিন্ন সময় বিভিন্ন রকম হয়রানি মামলা, মিথ্যা মামলা দিয়ে আমাদেরকে ডাবায় রাখার চেষ্টা করে। তাকে রিমান্ড নিয়েছিল, যদিও বা আদালত একদিনের রিমান্ড মঞ্জুর করেছিল, আমাকে 2 দিন টর্চারিং করেছিল ওরা।
কীরকম করে?
ওই ঝুলিয়ে, বিশেষ করে ঝুলিয়ে টর্চারিং করেছিল, কারেন্ট শর্ট দিয়েছিল। আন্দোলন করতেছিস, এই আন্দোলন করে তোদের হচ্ছে এটা কি, বা নিজেরা করি কারা, এগুলো করিস কেন?
Allegations of sexual harassment towards women in rural communities by those employed in the shrimp industry are also commonplace. Rafisa is one of the few prepared to speak out against the shrimp farm employee who raped her in 2008.
এছাড়াও আরও মেয়েদের হচ্ছে, এবং হয়েছে হওয়ার পরে ঘের মালিকরা তাদের সহযোগিতা করে, কর্মচারীর বিরুদ্ধে সহযোগিতা করে। অথচ আমার মতো এরকমই খেটে খাওয়া গরিব মেয়েরা, তাদের তো আর মামলা চালানো সম্ভব না, তাদের বিরুদ্ধে লড়াও সম্ভব না, এজন্য তারা কিছু করতে পারে না।
Our research into Bangladesh showed that the Bangladeshi shrimp industry in Khulna has forged a brutal path of ongoing ecological destruction and human rights abuses for the last 2 decades, subjecting thousands of people to extreme poverty whilst also potentially undermining the health of consumers. But it doesn't have to be like this. Umila Sardar lives on Polder 22, one of a few areas that has managed to successfully get rid of shrimp farms, and the difference is striking.
আর তার ফাঁকে ফাঁকে যে জমিটা বাকি থাকে তাতে তিল, তারপরে সবজি,
আরও মানে রবি মানে নানান রকম মানে ফেলায় রাখে না জমিটা, তাহলে নানান রকম হয়। আর এই ফল কারার দিকতেও সমস্ত ফল হয়, সমস্ত তরি তরকারি, তারপরে এখনকার সময় আম জাম, তারপরে অনেক বাড়ি কাঁঠালও আছে, স্কুলে পড়াশোনা করতেছে, সব কিছু মানে জীবনে যা লাগে।
The message from the communities affected by shrimp farming is clear.
উৎপাদিত হয় এবং কাদের মাধ্যম দিয়ে উৎপাদিত হয়। আমার বক্তব্য থাকবে যে এদের এই চিংড়িটা যেখানে উৎপাদিত হয় সাধারণ মানুষকে হয়রানি করে, সাধারণ মানুষের রক্ত চুষে, সাধারণ মানুষের জমি জমা ভিটেকাটা সব কিছু লুটপাট করে এই জিনিসটা উৎপাদন করা হয়। তাই মানুষের রক্ত যাতে আর না ঝরে তার জন্য আমি সেই সমস্ত মানুষগুলোকে বলবো যে এই চিংড়িটা যেন তারা বর্জন করে।
যে কি কষ্টের মধ্যে দিন যাচ্ছে যাতে বলার মতন না।
এই যারা বাগদা চিংড়ি করে চাষ করে এরা যে গরিব মানুষের রক্ত চুষিয়ে ইজ্জত নিয়ে তাদেরকে কত বিভিন্ন ধরনের শোষণ করে এই বাগদা চিংড়িটা তারা চাষ করে, আর চাষ করে এইটা বিদেশে রপ্তানি করছে। দয়া করে এই বাংলাদেশের এই চিংড়িটা যেন তারা না কেনে, আমি তাদেরকে অনুরোধ করবো।
অন বিক্রি হয়ে যায় তাহলে আর আমরা কোনো এটা যদি বিক্রি বন্ধ হয়ে যায় কোনো দিন তাহলে সুখে।
The cost of food across the world is on the rise, and many have blamed the scale of the price spikes on one thing: rampant food speculation on the global financial markets. The Ecologist travelled to Mexico, the birthplace of corn, to find out how speculation is forcing up the price of the country's staple food, with profound effects felt across Mexican society. In the mountains of Oaxaca state in southern Mexico, it is coffee production that fuels the local economy. Rural communities like these are not self-sufficient in food and are dependent on a cash crop, making them vulnerable to sudden price rises of staples such as corn.
Esta es la planta del café. Tiene aproximadamente 8 años y ya está en plena producción. Nosotros estamos preocupados porque nosotros, cuando sube el precio del café, entonces nosotros no tenemos café, y cuando estamos produciendo nos preocupa que vuelva a bajar la bolsa.
Lorenzo Hernandez and his wife, Genovena Oliveira, look after their grandchildren during the day, while the rest of the family work in the coffee fields.
Porque hace 2 años valía pues 2 pesos. 2 pesos el kilo, y ahora ya vale 6 pesos, hasta 6.50 ya vale. El maíz. Y la tortilla pues ya valía antes 2 pesos, 3 pesos, y ahorita ya vale 12 pesos el kilo. El precio ha subido bastante, no solamente ha ido al doble, sino que ha ido ahora sí, el triple.
Food price volatility on this scale has been linked directly to speculation.
Food speculation is basically the way in which banks and other financial traders can essentially bet on the price of food, and this takes place through what are known as futures markets. So these were originally set up to help farmers and food producers and buyers to kind of manage their risk of prices changing over time. But instead what we're seeing now is other people coming in who've got no connection with the food supply whatsoever, coming in and using these markets just to bet on the rising and falling price of food.
The speculation is going stronger and stronger. Right now we think that about 20% of the total market for corn is in the area of investors, financial investors, speculators that are just making a contract and reselling the contract. They don't need the grain for any other purpose.
At a wholesale market in Oaxaca City, traders have seen prices rise in recent months.
El maíz ha estado subiendo de precio por la helada grande que se vio en febrero, que afectó. Sinaloa es el país que abastece casi toda la República Mexicana de maíz.
In Sinaloa, that is the principal state of production of corn, there were frost, very heavy frost, so the production expected went down. About half of the total production was lost. So during the year, we had been importing corn from the US and from South Africa also.
What we see in somewhere like Mexico is that when there's a good local harvest, things are fine, they can rely on the local crops. But increasingly, particularly in Mexico, domestic maize production is being undermined by free trade deals with America, where maize is much more heavily subsidized. So now what we see is when there are poor harvests, Mexico now relies on importing food from abroad, which is where the high prices that have come from food speculation really hit them hardest.
For Mexicans, that means higher prices for their daily tortilla.
México es un pueblo de maíz, forma parte de nuestra cultura. El maíz es no solamente un grano, ¿no? Sino que es toda una visión del mundo.
El maíz es el principal alimento de los mexicanos. Nuestro territorio es centro de origen y diversificación genética del grano, lo cual significa que en México se crearon las primeras plantas del maíz.
Y esto lo venimos consumiendo desde la niñez, desde hace ya muchos años. Nuestros abuelos, nuestros antepasados nos enseñaron que eso es una alimentación ahora sí importante para nosotros. La mayor parte del dinero que ganamos va a la compra de los alimentos. Hay algunas familias que no les alcanza el dinero, están comprando los alimentos, y entonces ya los niños que van a la escuela ya no tienen útiles, ya no tienen ropa como para que asistan a una escuela.
It's not just hunger that's the real problem here. It has massive impacts across different aspects of poverty. So for example, we found that when food prices have risen, families have had to eat less fruit, less vegetables, less meat and dairy, and they have a far less healthy diet. We've also seen households that have had to eat into their savings or take out loans just to be able to afford food. And we've also seen them have to cut back on expenditure such as healthcare and education. And all these things have much longer term impacts than just the impact of a shortage of food in the short term.
The impact of the higher prices is felt throughout the expenditures of the poorer Mexicans, and then subsequently it's felt in terms of a lower demand for other things within the Mexican economy, and which is a real concern because we don't see the domestic demand growing as fast as would be necessary.
Food speculation has become a real issue now because of deregulation of these markets that happened about 10 years ago. And what we've seen since then is the big investment banks, people like Barclays Capital and Goldman Sachs, moving into commodity markets. So over the last 10 years, we've seen about $100 billion pour into these markets, flooding, as I said, the kind of farmers and food producers that normally rely on these markets and overwhelming them, and that's why this has become such a problem now.
In an unusual move, the Mexican government has itself begun speculating on the food futures market in an effort to counter volatility in corn prices. But many believe that the only answer is regulation.
My particular opinion is if you look at any regulation in the market, you've got to look at some sort of regulations or some sort of movements or some sort of actions which will limit the volatility in the market as you move into the future. I'm not really worried about the large money coming in. I'm worried about the coming in, moving out, and coming in, moving out. That's the real concern on the future.
So what we're calling for is a limit to be introduced that limits the amount of the market these traders can hold. At the moment, they're dominating the market. They make up much more of the market than farmers and other traders who actually rely on these markets day in, day out. What we want to see is new rules brought in that cap that limit their influence, and can then allow prices to be more fair, more stable, and more transparent for the future.
Rosarno, southern Italy. This is the centre of the Italian orange growing industry. Thousands of tons of fruit cultivated in the surrounding countryside is brought here for processing. It is then shipped off for sale as fruit, as juices, or for concentrates used in food and drink manufacturing. A number of well-known soft drink brands source ingredients from the region, say campaigners, but an ecologist investigation has revealed a hidden side to Italy's vast orange trade.
Siamo nella piana di Rosarno Gioia Tauro, una delle zone più vocate all'agricoltura calabrese. Siamo in una località dove ci sono circa 10.000 ettari destinati alla produzione di agrumi, clementine, agrumi per il consumo fresco, ma soprattutto agrumi per la spremitura, per fare il succo concentrato per le bibite che poi noi comunemente chiamiamo aranciate.
Citrus fruit cultivation is vital to the economy of the Rosarno region. But competition from producers abroad and a price crash have taken their toll.
I problemi che oggi ci sono su questa piana è che da qualche anno le grosse multinazionali, insomma, le grosse industrie di produzione delle bibite sottopagano questo succo, sostanzialmente costringono i piccoli trasformatori locali, quelli che fanno materialmente la spremitura.
Allora, io qua c'è un'azienda di quasi 4 ettari che complessivamente mi producono 1500 quintali di prodotto. E li devo lasciare sulle piante perché i costi di raccolta sono 7 centesimi, più portarli all'industria incidono altri 2-3 centesimi e quindi sono quasi 10 centesimi. Loro me li pagano a 7 centesimi e me li pagano pure fra un anno se riescono a pagarmeli, quindi a me non conviene raccogliere più, li lascio così.
Farmers rely on a cheap source of itinerant labour to carry out the fruit harvest. Each winter, thousands of migrants flock to Rosarno, hoping to scratch a living harvesting oranges. Most are from Africa, some are from Eastern Europe, many are in the country illegally. The Africans earn as little as €25 for a full day's work. It can be much less. Many of the migrants living in appalling squalor, in run-down farmhouses or in makeshift slums on the edge of town. The Ecologist had to film in this slum after dark, after being warned that journalists were not welcome.
How many people live at the camp? How many people live here, do you think?
I can say 200 people.
And is there there's no running water or electricity or anything?
No, nothing. When you see the condition, there's not, no light.
Health problems are a constant peril. With mainstream hospitals often refusing to treat migrants, the charity Emergency provides access to this mobile clinic.
Abbiamo cominciato a vedere, soprattutto a partire dall'inizio di gennaio, alcuni casi che potrebbero essere correlati all'attività lavorativa e soprattutto magari a un uso improprio o errato di alcuni fitofarmaci, soprattutto gli anticritogamici, cioè i fungicidi che sono quelli utilizzati in questo periodo qui. Abbiamo visto soprattutto fenomeni irritativi, quindi ad esempio dermatiti da contatto nelle zone esposte, mani e volto, o congiuntiviti, ovviamente per esposizione degli occhi.
So bad are conditions that the authorities have recently housed some migrants in temporary refugee camps. Daniel's story is typical for many migrants arriving from Africa.
It was really difficult because the boat didn't get it easy, so we hit some stones by the seaside.
Hit some rocks. Yeah. And what happened? A lot of people went into the sea.
Yeah, really, 3 people died.
3 people died in the boat you were in?
Yeah.
In 2010, tensions in Rosarno boiled over after 2 migrants were killed. The incident led to rioting and revenge attacks by local vigilantes. Many migrants were bussed out of town for their own safety. Giant migrant slums were destroyed. The local authorities have been trying to tackle the problem ever since.
Allo stesso tempo noi come istituzione locale, ma anche l'istituzione provincia, il comune, il ministero, stiamo cercando di trovare delle soluzioni definitive, soprattutto in termini di accoglienza e anche in termini di integrazione. Quello che loro chiedono sono i corsi di lingua italiana e noi stiamo cercando di darli, perché la vera integrazione può partire solo dalla conoscenza del linguaggio. E sulle strutture di lungo periodo ci stiamo lavorando, avremo, spero, già l'anno prossimo dei moduli prefabbricati definitivi che daranno loro un'accoglienza stagionale e nello stesso tempo una soluzione definitiva verrà per circa 150 di loro con la costruzione degli alloggi che verranno recuperati da alcuni beni confiscati alla mafia.
This tent camp was due to be opened by the authorities shortly after our visit. But workers continue to arrive in Rozzano each year, and farmers are quick to hire. Today, many want to return home, but are trapped, with no money, no documents, and no means of escape. There's growing anger and resentment at the treatment migrants receive.
I tell them I am not criminals. I am working. They are exploiting us. Exploiting. We don't have aim. We don't have nobody to help. Government system, apartheid, colonization, silent colonization, silent slavery. No future.
Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories, world news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.